I don't think anyone disagrees with the concept of what's the benefits of the 2D barcode. It's just about, but how easy will it be for me?
Hello and welcome to the Next Level Supply Chain with GS1 US, a podcast in which we explore the mind-bending world of global supply chain, covering topics such as automation, innovation, unique identity, and more. I'm your co-host, Reed.
And I'm Liz.
And welcome to the show.
Hi, Liz. Are you ready to talk barcodes?
I cannot wait.
Well, don't be too excited. On today's show, we're speaking with Marcia Mendez from Walmart. Walmart has a lot of experience with barcodes. The humble barcode is scanned globally over 6 billion times a day. So it's 6 billion times each day a barcode is scanned. And like most things, this widely used technology is evolving. Consumers are demanding more information, supply chains are requiring more automation and digitization. So what's in store for the future of the barcode? Let's find out more. Marcia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Reed. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, we're happy to have you here.
Yeah, we're really excited to have this conversation. But before we get really to the 2D and the next generation of barcodes, can you just, Marcia, tell us a little bit about yourself and what your role is at Walmart?
Sure. So I'm responsible for enterprise-wide item data governance platform. So that's across the international markets, just so as opposed to Sam's Club and the other entities. I also have under my purview GS1 initiatives. So that would be verified by GS1 to the barcodes and the accelerators. So that's my wheelhouse within the Walmart environment.
Awesome. So we have a lot to talk about today, but the 1D barcode, we've been in many conversations. People are like, oh, it's dead. Computer vision is going to take it over. And I'm a huge fan of computer vision. We've all been around where Walmart started requiring RFID on pallets back in the early 2000s. But we're seeing this surgence of 2D barcodes. And what brings you at Walmart to start looking at 2D barcodes?
It is still very much in its infancy, so therefore for us it's very exploratory. But when we talk about the benefits of 2D barcode around sustainability, traceability, the supply chain advantages as far as improved visibility, for sure we're seeing a lot of attraction there, especially not just on the POS side, but possibly at the point of entry from the DC side, so that it can funnel all the way down through the retail level. So there's a lot of benefits. There's a lot of aspects that are intriguing to us. So hence, we're happy to be a part of the journey in understanding what does it mean for us? What does it mean for our suppliers?
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. What does it mean for you? What does it mean for your suppliers? You mentioned that, you're in the infancies and this is new and you're still in the research. I know that some people listening are going to be like, well, 2D barcodes, they've been out for a long time. You go here, go there, and I'd used a QR code for this and a QR code for that. And we don't disagree, but when you talk about industry and you talk about scale and you talk about, unified or ubiquitous adoption, that's what you're talking about when you're talking about infancies. Is that fair enough to say?
Yeah, that's fair enough to say. I mean, yes, it's been around for a while, and especially during the pandemic, we're seeing lots of QR codes popping up on TV. And, brands do have it on their packaging. But is it what we're using at the POS? No, we're not. Do we have the capability, or do the scanners have the capability? They probably do. So the infancy means, what do we need to do to migrate from 1D to 2D as a company?
That's a great segue, because it was one of the questions we had. And knowing that you've been a part of the GS1 standards users group, and you're using our point of sale test kit, which was designed to help companies figure out if they're ready for scanning advanced data carriers like a 2D, a QR code, or something like that. And not just a 1D UPC barcode at the point of scale. At the point of sale. So what did you expect to learn from using these test kits? And were there any surprises for yourself?
So I think what I expected to learn based on the conversation with a colleague was that we can't read 2D barcodes, and then that came to fruition. However, it was a function of what type of 2D barcode it was, but ultimately, even if we could scan it, we couldn't read it. So scannability and readability were two different things. So that was interesting. But then also, too, I think what we learned was that the technology does exist within our existing hardware. It's just about enabling the software to do it. So that was also a good thing, because it's a whole lot better than having to buy all brand new hardware.
That's a great point. A lot of people, you just scanning versus reading, right? And then the hardware versus the software. But software is a lot easier to deal with in some aspects, where I don't have to make any physical changes. I could just push out some new code at night. And
then how long does that take? And the caveat that I will add is, the conversation that I'm having with you is for Walmart US. I know in our international market, which I've brought them into the loop, the POS there is going to be different in different markets. So I don't know what that looks like. That may be more complex, more involved, but for the US, it's really just a matter of the software.
Awesome.
So, Marcia, one of the things that you had mentioned with kind of the excitement around the 2D barcode is enabling sustainability and traceability through that supply chain, and using the test kit. I mean, trying to understand the benefits from your perspective. How important is it to prepare all of those stores? I mean, thousands of stores, right? To ingest that richer product data. Is it worth it in your what's the right word, exploratory, to get that information? So maybe that's not necessarily a question. It's just such a big undertaking when you start thinking about that scale from a Walmart perspective.
I mean, ultimately the business question becomes, what happens if you don't sign up for 2D barcodes? Because of the brands, of the manufacturers are utilizing this label and to provide their pricing information and everything else that we would need at the POS, then the last thing that we would want as a company is for us to have a poor customer experience where you're trying to ring up things at the counter and we can't ring it up because we didn't enable our 2D barcodes, the scanners to read it. So from a business perspective, you don't want to have that poor customer experience where they're like, oh, it takes too long at the register, so we won't bother shopping at Walmart. So the driver there, I think, really becomes, what are the suppliers doing? What are the brands doing? Because if they're not converting, then we as a retailer wouldn't need to convert. Because what's the point of it's their products that we're trying to ring up. Is there advantages to having all of that information, having good positive consumer engagement so that they can see, information about the brand, information about shelf life, all in one place? Absolutely. But if it's not coming to us that way, then what is the driver for us to engage with this activity? But so this is why I feel that the supplier is the driver of this, and we need to be able to respond as quickly. If some suppliers are not doing it till 2026, which I doubt that's the case, then maybe we don't do it till 2026. But if they're going to start next year, then we need to start next year. But this is a personal opinion.
Yeah, no, and we've been having a lot of conversations about that too. We hear people say, well, we don't want our packaging to turn into like a NASCAR fender. Now, I live in Charlotte, so, all NASCAR fans out there, hello. But what they're really getting at is, now I'm a brand and I have my packaging and I have a 2D barcode for point of sale. I have a QR code because I'm trying to connect with my consumer in a different capacity. And then there may be some other requirement for something else. And so they're losing that space on their packages. Are you getting involved at that level with conversations, or are you just more focused on, well, that's what's coming to us and we're going to take the test and see if we can do it?
So I personally am not getting involved with that, but I will say that I know that Walmart is looking at 2D or QR codes at the shelf label. So, which implies to me that by default, they are getting involved with those conversations from a brand side. But from where I sit, the house that I sit in, I'm not getting involved with that at the moment.
And are there any specific things that you've learned just by doing the testing that could be feedback to the brands or manufacturers on how they're preparing for potential changes? Kind of a feedback loop.
I think the main feedback that we'd like to see is to, at a minimum, have the verified by GS1's 7 attributes be a part of those 2D barcodes. We'd like to have the ability that if the GTIN is not in our item file, then by default of scanning that 2D barcode, then everything comes up that we would need to know about the item. We would like to know a case pack versus in each, so that if we open a case, we have immediate visibility from scanning the barcode, everything that's in the case, and not just relying on the each level. Because although this is for the POS, it doesn't come straight into the store. It starts at the DC level. So from a supply chain perspective, we'd like to have that visibility up front so that everything is readily available.
It sounds like your cat wants to eat or something. It's like,
Oh, you're right. The dry food went off, but the wet food needs me. He was a bit distracting. So we'd like to have the visibility to essentially to as much information as possible from scanning the barcode, specifically the GTIN type information, the shelf life, the batch number, everything that will give you the traceability, especially around FDA requirements. That's what we would really be looking for. Yes, it's nice to have the brand information and everything there is to know about ABC brand, or XYZ brand, but from a capturing data where it will enable us to ensure that we have the right inventory level, that we know that up front, where it will ensure that we're not selling items that are out of stock, out of approaching their shelf life. That's the kind of information I do believe will be hugely beneficial. Hugely.
I'm so glad that you shared your perspective here on this, because the beauty of 2D is more data, right? But sometimes more data isn't the best thing to have, because garbage data is just garbage data, but the right data can make or break scenarios and use cases. And so I think it's really important that we continue to collaborate and work with everyone on this. You brought up what we haven't heard in a long time on our podcast, but it's that case versus each. And it's important to you and your inventory management and your purchasing and your replenishment to understand, well, wait a second, did we just run out of the case, or did we just run out of one of the 36 that were in the case? It's a big difference. But then on the marketing side, especially for the brands, they're thinking, well, how can I connect with the customer? How can I provide whether it's in recipes or care and feeding for whatever the product or warranty information or anything else. That's why they like the extra data too. But we have to find this common ground where it can work from the customer side, from the logistics through supply chain, and at the point of sale, so that the whole thing can start over again. It's very interesting. I'm glad you brought that up.
So if I put my logistics hat on, because I grew up in supply chain, for sure I'm always going to think about inventory. But if I put my consumer hat on, nothing bothers me more than going to a shop, whether that be the supermarket or Nordstrom's rack. Well, it's more likely in the supermarket, and they've run out of something. That's inventory. So whether it's inventory for the consumer and they don't know when the item's coming in, or inventory at the DC level, ultimately will affect me as a consumer. So I'm always going to think in terms of, I didn't have it's maybe wonderful to have the brand information, but if the good isn't there when I show up, that doesn't help.
Right.
And not be told, oh, it'll be 2 weeks. Oh, we don't know when it's coming in, because we've seen a lot of that.
We've all seen a lot of that. I think the standard response is, "Oh, that truckload's coming tomorrow." Yeah. Yeah. I'm coming tomorrow. I'm going to check it out tomorrow.
Yeah, what you said, Marcia, about that additional data and the power that potentially these 2D barcodes can have, and you can be selective in what you as a retailer can see, right? So, for instance, with regulations and FSMA, Food Safety Modernization Act, or the healthcare items that you have, and being able to scan that and then do with it what you need to, and then also have the consumer information too in one barcode. I just think that there's so much that we can do with this, and like you said at the very beginning, it's at the infancy, and we're all kind of learning together what kind of power this can have.
I mean, ideally, I think I personally would like to see the elimination of one as opposed to having them two run simultaneously, but we don't know when that will happen. So from the brand side, and if you're selling something like this eye drop, obviously it's a bit small to put everything that you need, but if you've got that right 2D barcode, then you won't need the UPC. I'm showing a picture for those who can't see. So, and I think they'll, from a marketing perspective, they will figure that out. It's an evolving topic. I think depending on where you sit in that, I'm going to loosely use the term supply chain, and whether it be from the time you're manufacturing the goods till the time you deliver it to a customer till the time it's purchased, depending on where you sit, you will have different needs, whether it be inventory management, traceability, sustainability, the safety aspect, the consumer engagement. Wherever you are in that spectrum, we will all have different needs. So when you talked about Reed, you have to have the right data. What's the term? Garbage in, garbage out, GIGO. That the onus is upon the brands to ensure that right data. I think we as retailers would like to see some standardization so that everybody's providing the same info. I think that would be beneficial. And I think a good start there is verified by GS1, having those standard GTINs, so that the minute you scan that barcode, the information is immediately available.
I wanted to come back to something that you had talked about a little earlier when you talk about that overall supply chain from the beginning to a retailer to the consumer. And do you see industry coming together? So obviously, you've been in many different facets of the industry. We all have. Do you see industry coming together to get behind the 2D barcode? The suppliers, the retailers, to enable this, like you said, standardization of what's being sent, whether it's verified by GS1 or whether it's those attributes plus others?
I think there's a good case for them to come together. However, depending on which industry that you're in, you may have different needs. So that may drive different behaviors. So as I just demonstrated the packaging for eye drops, somebody who's making eye drops versus somebody who's making a TV, the onerousness for them to take on that initiative may be a little bit harder. So they may have some reluctance, but I think everybody can see the benefit. It's just about how do they go about applying it most easily, most cost effectively for them. And I still say infancy in that, to my knowledge, whilst the 2D barcodes exist, I don't know if any retailer is actually using it. I don't believe so at the POS level.
No, so I think you're absolutely right. And I think what you're doing and what we're doing in conversations with you is determining those use cases to enable those conversations, whether it be, like you said, the eye drops, the lettuce, the TVs, so that we can come together and problem solve those individual use cases.
I don't think anyone disagrees with the concept of what's the benefits of the 2D barcode. Maybe there are some differences. It's just about but how easy will it be for me?
Yes.
Right.
And I think that becomes the driver behind how quickly are they the early adopters or are they the laggards?
Yep.
Right. Yeah. What I was going to get at is we're going to need a transition period where, and please tell me if you think otherwise or see it differently, but where like at Walmart, where you're at the point of sale, some of your products are going to have 1D barcodes and some of them will have 2D barcodes in the future, and you'll have to be able to handle them both the same way for the same customer experience at the point of sale checkout. Do you see it happening that way?
So one of the things I know is that the scanners that we do have the ability to read 2D barcodes right now. However, because the data isn't there from a price perspective in GTIN, they can't use it for that. So somebody on the technology side, on the tech side, needs to figure out how do we run the two simultaneously in that transition period. So at least I know we can do it, but it's about how do we make it seamless for the customer. And that would be a question for somebody on the tech side versus on the non-engineering side like myself.
Right. So some of our listeners may be working in manufacturing, and you talked about there's a lot of different angles: distribution, food, retail, packaging, engineering, marketing professionals, logistics, and so on. Who among them should be paying attention to adopting 2D carriers? I mean, who are folks out there, if they're not doing it today, like our listeners are listening in and it's like, listen, if you don't have 2D on your radar or you're not experimenting with it or even talking about it, you need to get on that now. Who would you recommend?
For sure, packaging engineers. And
Okay.
probably not the first one you would have thought that I would have said, but just based on the earlier example I was giving with respect to the smaller items, your eye drops or what have you, or even a pen like this sold alone, they're the people who are going to be most challenged, and they're going to have to figure out how do they make this 2D barcode work in their environment. And then after that, or I would say them in conjunction with the marketing professionals, because obviously they're trying to get that information in there to ensure that good consumer experience. So and it's only my own opinion, but those are the two that I would lean towards, because if you can't get the code on the item that the 2D barcode on the item that you're selling, then you're going to have challenges post 2027.
Yeah, you brought up a visual for me, which is, oftentimes you think, okay, well, a 1D barcode, you can just put a 2D barcode there. Well, actually, in some scenarios, depending upon the size of the item, a 2D barcode is easier to make smaller. I don't know. Maybe I'm stepping out of line there. I'm not a technical, engineer in that case, so I may be wrong, but a 2D barcode for some products, it's kind of gets stretched out lengthwise, where I don't know if we can do that. I'm sorry, a 1D barcode. I don't know if we can do that with a 2D barcode. Liz, am I making any sense there? Or?
No, you are. And actually, Marcia, you touched a special place in my heart, because by trade, I'm a packaging engineer. So it's so very true that packaging engineers and that kind of work, not only getting that barcode on the packaging, but how do labeling systems work, and how do you quickly get those printed on packaging with them both barcodes? So no, Reed, I think that you're right on the mark, and it's all of that investigation that has to happen to enable the whole thing to be successful.
And I think that that's what we've kind of, through our conversation here today, is there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And there's a lot of collaboration that needs to be done. So, well, Marcia, thank you again for joining us today. Really appreciate your insights. And, walked away with a lot of things to think about, because there's a lot to consider here. Hardware, software, 1D, 2D, simultaneous, packaging. There's a lot to consider. So really appreciate you talking with us.
My pleasure. And I look forward to getting involved with other parts of this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Next Level Supply Chain with GS1 US. If you enjoyed today's show, you can subscribe to our feed or explore more great episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to share and follow us on social media. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.